If you're in Seattle, and you need to buy or sell a home, we'll be right there for you. Because we're the realtors that you can trust. So go to ronanddonsitdown.com.
You're listening to The Ron and Don Show on the Ron and Don Radio Network.
Hey, you guys, what's going on? And welcome to another edition of the Ron and Don Show. And we are back live in the Les Schwab studio.
What is up, Ron and Don Nation?
Hey, coming up on the Ron and Don Show, we want to talk about debate in America. We want to talk about a fair fight in America. And we also want to talk about Charlie Kirk and what happened yesterday. And in fact, by the time that you've listened to this and we've released this, I'm going to imagine that they have probably caught the shooter. In fact, what's kind of the update where we're at is we're recording. I think they just released a picture.
They
right?
did. It's difficult in the podcast world to do a fluid news event like when Don and I were on Cairo. This would be the sort of thing where you can update people every 15 minutes with new information, and it's happening live and in real time. And so in podcasts, when you're recording something and then it gets released on the podcast player, and some people might be listening to this in 2026, or they will be listening to this in 2026. But the most current thing in this, with Charlie Kirk being killed in Utah, is that they have found the weapon in the woods nearby the campus. They've also got a CCTV image from a stairwell of who they believe the suspect is, and they've released that to the media.
Yeah. As we sit here right now, we don't know who the shooter is, but we have had the president come out and blame this on the left and the left lunatics and talk about the fact that it seems like I know in Fox News they've talked about it seems like the bullets are only pointed one way. And he, in a statement that he released last night, talked about all the bullets that have been heading his way, because they have, and all the Republicans. But he didn't talk about the Democrats. He didn't talk about what happened in Minnesota earlier this year. He didn't talk about the fact that he wasn't willing to pick up the phone and talk to the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, because Walz, of course, ran against him. So he didn't want to give any thoughts and prayers when Congress folks and speakers there were murdered and maimed by a shooter. He also didn't talk about what happened with Governor Josh Shapiro when his mansion was set on fire, the governor's mansion, which, of course, Josh Shapiro is on the left. And he didn't talk about Governor Whitmer in Michigan, who we all know that a militia was on their way to kidnap her and kill her. So it seems like if we're going to throw some blame around here, there's plenty of blame to go around. But I think without knowing maybe who the shooter is, and I think it's important for people to know that an extreme shooter like this, that does something this vile, I don't think represents everyone on the left. And I also think when I think about the person that went, or the militia that was going to go and kidnap Governor Whitmer, for instance, I don't think that represents everybody on the right. I think most of us are on the left for some reasons, and on the right, which kind of puts us in the middle. What is your take on the blame? Because when you jump online right now, there are people celebrating his death, and one of the reasons they're celebrating his death is because of this quote right here. It's April 2023. He's at a Turning Point USA Faith Convention, which he started when he was 18. He said this: "You will never live in a society when you have an armed citizenry where you won't have a single gun death." He also added, "I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal. It is rational." It's also gone on to say that he didn't believe in empathy. He thought it was a word that was made up on the left. And he also went on to say that if he saw a black pilot that was piloting his plane, that he would have concerns about getting on that plane because he wondered if they'd be qualified or if they were sitting in that seat because of DEI. Your thoughts on Charlie Kirk, because he certainly had a lot of opinions.
The thing, and I appreciate the setup, it was very well done. the thing that I'm trying really hard to do here is to put firewalls around different topics. So, in other words, I believe you can have a set of thoughts about Charlie Kirk's ideology and firewall that off from somebody taking a rifle and shooting someone dead at a rally. And I can take that and firewall that off from Democrats and Republicans and all these things. And what I see happening a lot in these discourse is trying to do attribution and causality and correlation to things that are completely uncorrelated. And so I think, just full stop, political violence is never an answer to anything. And so Kirk should not have been shot to death. So just full stop. There's no, I don't want to expound on that any farther. There is no world in which I think that a person should be shot with a high-powered rifle, period, end of story. And so walling that off from, should we take a look at what he stood for and what his beliefs are and the irony of what he was talking about when he was shot? Maybe there comes a time when you talk about that, and maybe there comes a time where you can have attribution, or you talk about larger impacts of these things. But I read a really interesting piece from Ezra Klein today, who is about as far left as you can go in America. And Ezra said, this guy did things the right way. And what he meant by that, it's a really interesting piece, and I encourage people to seek it out. What he basically said is Charlie Kirk, regardless of if you agree with him or not, he was out in the arena, he created a movement, and he was trying to persuade people, and he did persuade a lot of people. That is the foundation of America. That some other version of Charlie Kirk could have gone out and made their own movement, and they could have toured campuses, and they could have persuaded people to think their way, maybe left-leaning or independent or whatever they wanted. So Charlie Kirk was doing what America was set out to do, and that is, if you disagree with government, go out, spend your time, energy, and resources to get a coalition and persuade people with words that your position is correct. And then use that to go vote people into power that agree with you. And so what the American experiment was founded on, we don't want a monarch telling us what to do. We don't want a church telling us what to do by force. We don't want to have to face a beheading if we disagree with the people in power. We're going to set up, and at the time, nobody knew if it would work or not. Can we set up a government where we don't need bullets and force and coercion to get along? Can we set up a society where you win by persuasion and you win by convincing other people to be on your side and to coalesce around these set of ideas? And when we get to the point where we're reverting back to force and coercion and using language around war and bullets and all these things, we're losing the very spirit of America. The American experiment rejected all that. And they said, no matter how much we disagree, we're not using bullets and force. America is going to be a system where everybody gets to vote, and you vote in the people that you believe in and the ideals you believe in. And over time and over generations and over centuries and decades, it is going to evolve into a more perfect union. That was the guiding light of America. And there were different parties back then. They don't even exist in today's America. And so it really saddens me. This has now become a flashpoint to create new enemies and to call out for war and to use words like he's a martyr and this is war. We're not in a war with other Americans, at least right now. This is not a religious argument where someone can be martyred for something. This was not a religious event that he was doing. It's a political event. And so I always go back to the quote from, I believe it was Edward Kennedy, when John Kennedy was shot, where he said, let's not make my brother bigger in death than he was in life. And he was talking about a man that had a very big life. I believe it was for Robert Kennedy. And so same thing. I always try to think of that in the wake of these tragedies where everybody wants to be hyperbolic. Everybody wants to make things bigger in death than they were in life. He was a big deal in conservative circles. He should not have been shot. I'm willing to debate his individual beliefs and debate the ramifications of what that means politically. But my overall message is America was about nonviolence and solving things through persuasion, not through bullets.
Do you agree with the flag being lowered half staff today?
He was not in the military, and he was not in any political office. So I think for government buildings, I disagree with it.
Well, I think they're supposed to be lowered today for
9/11.
Right.
Yeah, 9/11 is. There's a protocol for those things, and again, if you want to change the protocol, fine. But do that through the way that we change.
It's interesting
protocol.
though. If you go and look at some of his speeches, the way that he felt, this our president is very unique in that, you know, Charlie Kirk, they say, visited the president in the White House. Last time he was in the White House, probably 100 times.
Yeah.
And you can see that these influencers and the young influencers, they have a lot of influence on this president. And when you look at Charlie Kirk and his belief system and his connection with young people, because you're right, Ron, he really connected with young people, and he's willing to go in the lion's den. He's willing to go onto a lot of progressive campuses and set up a microphone and say, you know who I'm going to put at the front of the line is people that disagree with me. Let's talk more about that on the other side of this. Hey, you guys, it's Ron and Don here for our good friends at Les Schwab. Where right now, listen to this. You can save up to $120 instantly on select sets of all-terrain tires. These are the same tires that I have on both of my vehicles at home, and I want to tell you, these tires are not just dependable, but they have all-weather traction for your everyday commute and your off-road adventures. And for a lot of you, you know, I do a lot of camping. Yeah, and I love these all-terrain tires also when I'm heading up to the mountain passes this winter. And let's face it, Ron, winter is right around the corner, and traction is everything. And that's what you get with these all-terrain tires from Les Schwab. It doesn't matter what the season is, right?
Yeah, and as always, every tire comes with America's best tire warranty, including 60-day satisfaction guarantee and free lifetime maintenance. Just another way you get more from Les. Stop by your neighborhood Les Schwab or learn more at leschwab.com. Limited time offer while supplies last. See leschwab.com/sale for details.
If you have a friend that is ready to start their real estate journey, send them to ronanddonsitdown.com.
All right, you guys, welcome back to the Ron and Don Show. You know, something that's interesting that I think that we can learn from what happened, and again, Charlie Kirk and his belief system certainly wasn't mine, and there's things in his belief system that I certainly disagree with. But I think for him to be gunned down, and again, we don't know who gunned him down, in the middle of doing something that Ron and I have always encouraged people to do what we have done on the air for decades, and what we have invited specifically even local politicians to come do is to sit down with us and let's have a rigorous debate, and let's talk about your side and our side and somebody else's side. Let's have a rigorous debate, and then let's include the audience in that debate. And at the end of it,
And let's celebrate when someone changes their mind.
yeah, or if they don't, and let's try to do that in a civil manner. Think about what he did when he started this movement when he was 18 years old, and then he dies at the age of 31. Is he went on to very progressive campuses, and he would set up his tent. He would preach the gospel. Sometimes they would have a worship service, which is very hard to do on progressive campuses, right? He would share his faith, and then he would set up a microphone, and he would ask people to come and debate him about anything. And the thing that I love that he did typically, and sometimes he'd lose it, we all do, I certainly do. He would take his microphone when somebody else was speaking. Have you noticed this? What does he do with the microphone? He puts it down. and he sits there and he listens and he'll nod his head. And sometimes he'll even say to people that he feels that are extremely on the left, he'll say, you know what, I didn't think about that. Or you know what, I agree with you. Or you know what, that's a really good point, right? We don't hear that in the partisan conversations that we're having today. It's one of the reasons why, look at his social media. He had more followers on his social media than ABC, NBC, I'm talking about their newsrooms, CBS, Fox, MSNBC, Bloomberg, and of course CNN combined. That is the kind of influence that he had. And a lot of times, and he was doing this in Utah yesterday. He would set up the tent, he'd put up the microphone, 3,000 kids showed up, he'd throw out the hats, make America great, 47th president, all that stuff. And then he would invite people to come to the microphone that disagreed with him. And when they would begin to talk, he would put his microphone down. I think there's a really good lesson in putting that microphone down, right?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. And I don't want to lionize Charlie Kirk in the sense of I vehemently disagree with most of his takes. And again, that doesn't mean he should be killed. And that's the difficult part when you talk about this in the wake of a tragedy, is separating these issues. But yeah, I agree with you. He was there's no doubt that he was not a skilled debater. A lot of his takes were not true. A lot of his takes were founded in conspiracy theories. A lot of his takes were fueled by stuff that I don't want to be a party of.
He was a big pusher of the election. He was election denier,
all that stuff.
And yeah.
But you can't say that he wasn't a talented speaker, because he was a talented speaker, and he tapped into something. So I think politically, and this is the part, it's interesting that Kamala Harris has a book coming out right now, talking about her failed run for the presidency.
109 days.
And so it's like the other side, the left, they could have invested in young influencers. They could have built out a network.
She wouldn't even go on those podcasts.
Right. So it's like you can. This is
now she's going to hide behind a book.
Right. This is a playbook that he sort of understood and had a talent for tapping into social media, tapping into his peer group, understanding what the young people were feeling, a certain type of young person was feeling. And I will say this, if there's trying to give credit to him, if there is credit to give, I think that on a lot of college campuses, it did swing too far left. And there was sort of a thought police happening if you disagreed on certain issues that became as constricted and as restricted as anything that was happening on the right. And so I think in a lot of these campuses, and I don't want to go down all the list of issues. People can figure that out on their own. But the pendulum had swung very far left. And so we do need college campuses where when you're 19 years old or 20 years old, you should be able to stand up and go and be wrong about something. You're trying to figure out your worldview. You should go, this is a controversial idea. Let's talk about it, because I don't know what I think yet. I'm not a full-fledged adult. Whatever the issue is. And it became a thing where people, they've done surveys where over 60% of college students go, I can't speak out in class because I'm afraid that someone's going to video me, put it online. I'm going to be shamed. I'm going to, in a class, like you could be in a class on government and you're like, I can't talk about what I think about government. You could be in a class on politics, a class on biology, and you might have a legitimate question because you're 18 years old. And you're like, I'm afraid to ask my question because someone might shame me and cancel me online.
It's really interesting how we are afraid of debate and we're afraid of being wrong. And we're afraid of climbing out of our silos. A number of months ago, Bill Maher, who is certainly to the left of me, but to a lot of people, they feel like he's moved center and even to the right because he got an invitation from the President of the United States to go to the White House. And the invitation was to come and have dinner and to sit down with him and the head of the USC, Dana White, And Kid Rock was on Bill Maher's show and they were debating. And Kid Rock said, you know what? I think what you should do is take your thoughts. I can get you a seat at the president's table for you to share some of the things that you want to share. And Bill said, I'll do that. He went and did that. And hundreds of thousands of people, without even knowing the conversation that Bill Maher had with the president, said, I'll never listen to you again. What are you doing? Why are you sitting down with him? Governor Gavin Newsom did the same thing with Charlie Kirk a number of months ago. He started a podcast and he said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do what Kamala Harris and other folks on the left didn't do. And I'm going to start sitting down with people that think differently than me, and I'm going to have a conversation with them. When Gavin Newsom sat down with Charlie Kirk, I listened to it a number of months ago. I didn't listen to it because Charlie just got shot. I listened to it a number of months ago. It is in fact, it was on my trip to Ireland. It is one of the most fascinating conversations that I've ever heard. It was so fascinating to hear. Sean Ryan, who has one of the biggest podcasts in the world, he's a special operator, SEAL team, all that stuff. He sat down with Governor, and he's way on the right. Conspiracy theories, all that stuff. Sean sat down with Governor Gavin Newsom. They talked for 5 hours. I couldn't turn it off. I could not turn it off. So for some reason, I'm very attracted to listening to people that think differently than I do. That's why yesterday, when I saw this news break, I wanted to see how it was being covered. And it was covered completely differently. MSNBC, all that creeper stuff, maybe you deserved it. Started creeping in there. CNN was trying to stay in the middle like they always do. Fox, it's us against them, right? These aren't news organizations. These are news organizations, well, light. These are people dressed up as journalists. This isn't journalism anymore. These are people trying to be influencers too. In an arena where they no longer have influence. It's really interesting when you look at Charlie Kirk and what he did. What he did is not only create a bunch of right-wing kids that are now have millions of followers and are very famous and have made lots of money, but he's also did it with kids on the left. If you sit down and you watch him, he'll sit in a circle with 20 kids and he'll debate them. And it'll be 20 kids that don't think like he does. And there's kids on the left now that are doing that. 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old kids that are sitting there with a debate clock and having a debate. Those in tears yesterday were some of those kids that were on the left because of what they saw on the right. And it encouraged them to say, you know what, in my own way, because I don't feel like Charlie does. I don't think that the Bible is the end-all, be-all for my life. And I do believe, and I'm not saying this about me, but these kids are saying, or I do believe in abortion, or I do think that transgender people should have rights, or I do think that a black woman should be able to fly a plane without someone looking at that and saying, well, hey, is that DEI, or is she even qualified? And there are influencers on the left now that, again, have much more power and much more say and much more connection than a lot of these news organizations that I feel like in some ways have run their course. Let's talk about this on the other side of this. Can we have a fair fight? And also, where do we go from here? We'll talk about that in a minute.
Thanks for being a part of the Ron and Don Nation. Subscribe to the Nation News at ronanddonsitdown.com. A behind-the-scenes look at everything Ron and Don.
All right, you guys, welcome back to the Ron and Don Show. The question is this, can we have a fair fight, and where do we go from here? I do have to say some of the coolest things that I've seen with Charlie on the right and a lot of these young kids on the left finding their own voice is sitting down with a debate clock, debating each other. Smart as hell, very insightful, never raising their voice, having a conversation, and then at the end of that, congratulating each other and saying, hey, you know what? You made a great point. Or, hey, I hadn't thought about that. I don't hear that in our conversations, and I also don't see people putting down their microphone, figuratively or literally. I know sometimes even in my own family, if I go home for a holiday, nobody puts down their microphone. They just pick up their microphone and they just blurt out all the shiznit that they've read online. And the thing that I love about these young kids finding their voice is they have some really well thought out positions. Some I agree with, some I don't, but at least they can speak it, right? And I think a lot of us, especially those of us that are older, I think we have to understand in a lot of ways we've been indoctrinated by the way that we were raised, the communities that we live in. And sometimes I think we have to be willing to step back, put our microphone down, listen to someone else. And every once in a while in a conversation with your family, your spouse, your friends, someone that disagrees with you, do you ever find yourself saying this? I didn't think about it that way. That's a great point. You know what? I'm going to go read more about that. I didn't know that. And that isn't celebrated enough in the debates that we have with one another, because we always, for whatever reason in our culture, we feel like we have to be right. And we feel like we have to get over on that other person.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And I've been trying to answer some of these questions for a long time. I found a piece from, or a podcast, David Frum, he works for The Atlantic, highly recommend his podcast. And he finally said something that unlocked this for me. And he was talking about the different tribes we have in America right now. And he's like, the motivation is what is critical here. And what he meant by that is like, so let's take a liberal progressive. What is their motivation? The fuel for that movement really is fairness and equity. And so it starts with, I feel like the world is unfair. I would like to make it more fair. And so that's where it comes out of. There's a certain brand of conservatism that has gained a lot of power in America, where the fuel for that is, who's my enemy today? And when he said that, it finally unlocked the door in my brain of what is going on. Because when you look at it through that lens, if you wake up every morning and you're like, who's my enemy today? And it used to be our enemy was Russia, or our enemy was China, or our enemy was communism. Now we go, our enemy is the person that doesn't think like me. My enemy is the person of a different religion. My enemy is the person from a different country. And we have a lot of folks that's the filter that they're going through the world on. And I would encourage you to just consider if you find yourself in that space, because that's what's happening here in this argument.
Well, hang on. In the way that you just framed that, though, you framed that. What I heard was liberal, progressive, coming from a good place, trying to make the world better. Conservative coming from a bad place.
Saying
that's what I just heard you say.
A sliver of conservatism. I think there are probably the majority of conservatives that aren't searching for an enemy. They're like, I have a set of values. I want the world to be more like my set of values.
And those values are being attacked. Yeah,
in some ways being attacked. And so I'm saying a certain part. If you are motivated by who's my enemy today, and I'm not trying to be good guy, bad guy. I'm trying to paraphrase what David was talking about. Is if you're searching for an enemy, you're going to find an enemy. And if you're searching every day for like, who do I need to get over on? That's my motivation. You will find someone. The old cliche, if when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. You're going to start, pounding on things. And so when I heard that, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense of why we start framing things as war and as a battle and as, bullets flying and all these things. When you start to use that rhetoric all the time, that either you're on my team or you're my enemy, that I think has gotten us in a place that is not good for America. No. You can believe differently than I am, and we're still on the same team. We're not enemies of each other. We're not enemies of the state. We don't have to dehumanize someone for believing something different from ourselves. And so it goes back to, what are you pursuing? And so, and I think there's a lot of conservatives that would pursue fairness as well. So I don't want to be misconstrued on that.
My point to people, and this is just being in media for so long, stop blaming things on the mainstream media, because the mainstream media doesn't exist anymore. When you watch the horrible video of him getting shot, that wasn't on CNN, MSNBC, or ABC. It wasn't on any of those channels. They blurred it all. That was all on social media. That was all on social media.
Thank God I didn't.
Everything that's been reported that's wrong has all been social media. Some of the facts that have been reported that have been right have all been on social media. People have to understand the power that they have behind that keyboard and what happens when you push that keyboard away. And I'm going to go to a football game this weekend. And I'm working with a bunch of parents there. We're going to help feed kids, and we're going to do some of the media stuff, and we're going to and we're going to drive buses, and we're going to have orange slices. So, and the bottom line is, I don't know what those parents think politically, but I do know how they feel about these boys, and I do know how much they love them. Because I've been around them. And it's kind of how this shows up in my life. So I'm going to be running a camera with my friend John. John's going to be running another. I don't know John's politics. I've known John at the gym, and our sons have interacted for probably the last 3-4 years. But the way that John shows up in my life is he shows up as a friend and a fellow dad, right? And if it ever came down to having a conversation about politics, I know that John and I, for instance, could have that conversation. Because we're not sitting there on the other side of a keyboard saying a bunch of shit that we're not accountable for. Because we fold up the laptop and then we go away and we feel like maybe we got over on someone. So I think social media for a lot of us right now can be so damaging. And I think it's so polarizing. And I think with the generation of kids that are coming up now, I see kindness and connection with them. And I do think we need to land in a place we should be able, because people are like, well, we don't talk politics in my family. You should be able to talk politics in your family and have a spirited debate about something. And then hug each other and love each other and sit down and have some turkey at a Thanksgiving Day meal. And to your point, Ron, and I really agree with that, this warmongering that I feel comes from the extreme left and from the extreme right, the bullets are flying. I think that rhetoric comes from both sides. Is that going to cool off? It's not. Are people in Congress and senators and people running for office, is that going to cool? It's not. They're going to continue to do that because driving a wedge between all of us is what gives them purpose and places them in office, right? It's what gets them on the TV show. It's what helps them to influence. It's what gets them more followers. It's what people. It is something that has happened in our culture that I don't know that we can unwind, and I don't think our generation is going to unwind it. I don't think we are. I can only hope that my son's generation will. I'll give you the final say.
Yeah, and so don't search for an enemy. Search for common ground. I think if people woke up in the morning and said, how do I find common ground with the people that I disagree with, as opposed to how do I find a new enemy today, that, you know, it's a mental shift. And then the last thing that I will say is, can we normalize and celebrate being wrong and changing our mind? There is no valor or bonus points in never changing your mind. Like, the best people in the world, the most accomplished people in the world are wrong all the time. And they look at what happened, and even we can go as far big up as like the Second Amendment. Is that working for us? Is it really working for us? Maybe some parts of that aren't 100% correct. If you don't even consider that, then you're being dogmatic. Like, if you won't consider anything in my life I could be wrong about. I could be wrong right now about everything in my life. My diet, my friends, my job, the way I think, the way I travel, money, relationships, sex, politics. I could be wrong about any or all of those things. And until you come from that point of view to where, then you're never going to evaluate anything. You know, when's the last time you were wrong about something of consequence and you changed your mind? I remember clearly changing my mind on the death penalty. I was flat out wrong for many, many years. And then finally some stuff hit me in the right way. I was like, oh, I think I'm wrong on this. And I've been wrong publicly and loudly about it. I'm going to change my mind. And if you've never changed your mind about something of consequence, I would invite you to consider that that's not a good thing. That's not a good thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, and part of that is putting our microphone down. That was excellent what you just said. Thanks for that. Hey, you guys, thanks for listening to this episode of The Ron and Don Show. We sure do appreciate it. If you need us, just reach out.
Yeah, ronanddonsitdown.com. Let's get you ready for 2026. And buyers, I've been so happy. We've had some Ron and Don Nation buyers recently finally go, maybe those guys are right. I'm going to jump in. Right now, through the end of the year, is prime buying time.
Yep.
You're not going to... I'm telling you, if interest rates come down 0.5 point and we get to January 1, it's not the time to buy. It is not the time to buy. You want to buy right now so we can help you get your finances in order. We can help you get your loan in order. We can help you find the property of your dreams. Now, we have a house that's closing tomorrow and possibly next week where these buyers were like, I don't know if we're ever going to find the place, Ron and Don. Our needs are so specific, we're not going to be able to find it. We found it, they're closing, and everybody is super happy.
Yeah. Anyway. RonandDonSitDown.com. I want to thank Matt and Grace, my son Gunnar, our dog Charlie. He's Ron, I'm Don. When you need us, just reach out. And don't forget, our real estate only show is coming up on Friday. And we have a beautiful horse property over in Bridle Trails that's for sale, and also a perfect house. We've never had a perfect house, but we have a perfect house down in Tacoma for well below $1 million. And it is brand new inside, you guys. And the woman that lives there is an interior designer along with her husband. He's a builder, and they have done an incredible job in this home. I've never seen a home like this in T-Town, and I haven't seen a lot of homes like this in Seattle either. So it's a house that is just, it has to be seen to be believed, and we're going to talk about it on Friday's show as one of our homes of the week. All right, till next time, you keep your head up and your shoulders back, and don't forget to put your microphone down every once in a while and go, that's a good point. I might be wrong about that. I didn't know that. Thanks for sharing that. I'm going to go find out more. Yeah. Till next time, you've been listening to the Ron and Don Show all night on the Ron and Don Radio Network.
Thanks for listening to the Ron and Don Show. Please hit subscribe.